All right, welcome to the first office hours. This will be a session where we have a look at some of our product details, but also talk about how we fit into the larger industry and just kind of talk about what is new in the world and what's happening. Today, we'll focus a little bit on compliance because that's always an interesting topic. But going forward in the future, we'll talk about whatever happened in the previous week, looking at what we might be looking for projects going forward and things like this. So hopefully it will be interesting for all of you as it is for me. I can see we have people still coming in huge numbers. That's very nice. Uh, we will have a Q&A box open throughout, so feel free to post your questions. I might only address them at the end once we've gone through the kind of topics that we were planning on. But if I see anything interesting, I might take them on the spot as well. So please feel free to drop in your questions whenever you have them, and we'll take them when they fit in or at the end of the session. Let's see here. So the first thing we're going to look at is in regards to compliance when you are, rather than just at the very end of the year or when you start your actual SOC or ISO certification process, rather than having to come up with everything at this all at the same time, if you're doing continuous monitoring, you can kind of stretch out the process over a longer period and understand what your shortcomings are, where you might need to have focus before you actually try to recertify or certify for the first time. So setting up continuous monitoring is a really strong way to kind of counter that stress of going through the actual certification. So I'll share my screen here and we'll have a look at how that's being done with our tool. All right, so I will move my Q&A thing here. And if we go into any of our different tools, let's take a network scanner, for instance. You'll always have the option to schedule directly from where you're starting. So you can set up your configurations, you fire off your scanner. Instead of just starting it now, you can also schedule it. So you'll be able to set your schedule start date and then however many times or however often you want to have it recurring. If you do have Vanta, you have the option for direct integration there as well. This is a decent way to get things done. It's not my preferred way to do it. When I'm looking at continuous monitoring or scanning on a continuous basis, I prefer to know that things are working before just setting up a recurrent scan. So I can fire off a scan, I can see the results from it, and then using that as the template, then setting up my recurrent scannings. So if I go to my scan sections here on the left side, and then find a scan that is relevant. So I've done my initial scanning. Let's take this network scan, for instance. And this is the one I want to use as the basis for my continuous scanning. I can then say schedule scan. And am I sharing the correct page now? I think I am. Yes. Okay, so this will have the configuration of that previous scan rather than just a blank scanning from that tool. And I can go directly to schedule. And again, I can set up my recurrence and my start date. And in that way, I can know that it's actually doing the thing that I am trying to achieve rather than just hoping that I'm setting up my configurations correctly. Especially if you're new to using our tools, this is a really strong way to get started quickly with your continuous monitoring rather than just stabbing in the dark and hopefully getting the correct results out of it. Once you've started doing your continuous monitoring, you'll also sometimes need to rescan the same that you've already done because there was a finding, you've done your remediation, and you want to make sure that the remediation actually worked. So this is when you're moving a little bit further than just monitoring, you're starting your remediation as well. and you want to make sure that the remediation you performed actually works the way you intended it to. So again, you can open up your scan and you can do a rescan of the same target. So again, simple as that. You have the configurations from the last time, and you can just start your scan directly from here. Really nice way to kind of make sure that everything is working the way it should be. And then once you've performed your scan, in the findings, that specific finding will have multiple entries in the, let's see if I have one here that has multiple, in the result dates here. So you'll be able to see each of the different times it was discovered in your solution. When you are testing any of your already found findings, let's go back in here and find one of these. Let's take something that's a little bit more interesting. When you have your findings and you have whether it has been done before or this is the first time you're doing it, you'll be able to then see here. You'll be able to go in and see what it looked like in the previous times it was discovered and in the last time, and see what the changes has been throughout your history. Once you have performed the scan and it no longer shows up, that's where you can showcase that the remediation has worked the way you intended it to, rather than it just being a blip that happened in the past, and then you don't know how to actually show that your remediation worked, because you ran the same scan again, and this time using the same settings, it didn't show up in your findings anymore. All right, let's see here. So once you have done your report, your scanning, you've done your continuous monitoring, you found some findings, and you have performed your remediation, the next step generally will then be to show this to your stakeholders, making sure that your internal team understands what has been going on, making sure your non-technical colleagues are on the same level and have the understanding should they need to talk about it, and making sure that any external parties who need to know can understand what has actually been going on. So first of all, when we're looking at any of our descriptions, so you can see this finding here, for instance, this was a server-side request forgery. The description we have made here is pulled from our database of vulnerabilities. Here, we try to write them as non-technical as possible. We try to write out all the abbreviations before just using them as technical jargon. And this hopefully will get your non-technical participants to also understand what's going on without them being left out. So the description here will come from our side from our database. Of course, once you have your findings, you can add any information to it. You can edit it to your liking, and then making sure that it is clear and understandable to whoever you're reporting out to. So if you need to make any changes, you can just go in and perform them. And once you save them, it will create a new result in the findings up here. That's the description of the vulnerability itself. Down here, you'll have the risk description. These are the details of what could happen if you don't remediate, or if you didn't remediate, if you've already performed the remediation steps. So here, it's again as non-technical as possible. We have explained what could happen should you not remediate. So this might be a situation where data could be changed or accessed, or potentially changed with other types of attacks. There's a lot of different potential descriptions in here. And again, if you have anything else you want to add to it, you can always make your own changes as well. The remediation part down here, that's where we start getting a little bit more technical. This is for the technical team. So generally, the non-technical parties don't really need to read the remediation. But here, generally, combined with the evidence up here, you'll be able to have a straightforward path to how do you actually perform the remediation. So all of these research steps, all of the pre-work has been done before you even start looking at the findings from your reporting. So how do we actually perform the reports? So this is just the details that is included in your reports. We have several different ways of actually reporting out. The first way is to combine multiple different scans and then create your report, like so. And you can just set it up from here. This is nice if you need to include everything from multiple different reports, or if you just need to include one report, you can generate it directly from here as well. If you need to include everything, this is a great way to do it. My preferred way of going about it is actually going into the findings section, because in here I can set my filters so they are relevant for what I'm currently doing. So I might need to make a report for my technical team so they can start doing their remediation, or I might need to pull a report so I can look at all of the items that need still to be verified, or I just want to include the higher risk items and I don't really care about the low risk items because I have a situation where there's a lot of findings. So I want to just start with the higher value ones and then work my way down. There's a lot of different situations where you might want to filter it down. And this is how it's done in the findings section rather than in the scan section. So this is where I prefer doing it. You have a couple of different options whenever you are creating your reports. So if I generate it here, by default, you'll always have the PDF, HTML, JSON, CSV, and Excel formats. But if you have the Pentest suite or you have the white labeling option, then you'll also have the option for a templated report. So if you select the editable template, you'll have a docx that you can output instead of just the standard formats. You decide which parts of the findings you include in the filter section, and then you determine if you want to group it by target or by vulnerability. Depending on what type of report out you're doing, you might choose one or the other. It's a preference thing, really, rather than being a standard for the industry. But whatever you're looking at, these are the basic options, and these are also generally what's accepted when you're performing something like an ISO or SOC 2. So really strong ways of reporting out once you have your findings already performed. Let's see here. The next part we're looking at is in regards to our integrations to Vanta and to some of our other, what are they called? Activities here. So Vanta integration, really, really strong for sending your results to your compliance. So instead of having to take them out and then putting them back into Vanta, you can directly integrate and you'll push the results directly there. Similarly, if you're using GitHub Actions, you can send it directly, and you'll be able to start working on them from there. We have a Jira integration. Again, similar thing. Instead of having to export and then import, you can just directly push it, where you'll be able to prioritize your tasks. So depending on what solution you're using, these are the most standard in the industry. But of course, if you have your own workflows, you can always take them out either through API or through webhook if that's relevant for you instead. Let's see here. So These are all things that you're doing as part of a larger workflow when you're doing your ISO 27001 or SOC 2, for instance. There's a lot of different certifications or compliance situations where vulnerability assessment and penetration testing is part of a larger system. So for your ISO certification, generally you're looking at uh, Annex A. I think the control is called 8.8. It's called Management of Technical Vulnerabilities. It doesn't explicitly mention vulnerability assessment or penetration testing, but almost every single auditor will say that's what it means, or that's part of what it means. So you need to align with your auditor to make sure that the solution is a good fit for what you're trying to achieve. Generally, this is what they're looking for, but some of the auditors will say you have to go in a specific way, or you have to do it from an external party, or they might have their own preferences of how it's being performed, or they might say that you need to take extra steps. It's not enough just to do a penetration test. So make sure you're aligned and don't take the steps that if they're not necessary, right? So it's always a good idea to have your continuous monitoring. It's great that you know everything is spick and span before you start your certification process, but uh, be aware that it might not be a hard requirement, or it might be a requirement that they're saying, if you don't do it, then we can't get your certification. We're always recommending setting it up as continuous monitoring because you know whenever something changes, it keeps you safe, not just compliant. So there's a trade-off where you're saying, okay, put in a little bit of effort up front, and you get to know if something changes, if your environment changes, if new CVEs roll out, or if you're running into a situation where you were safe, you were very confident, you might have just received your certification last month, but a new CVE rolls out. And because if you don't have continuous monitoring, you just did that spot in time check, you set it as a check mark rather than as a continuous monitoring, you could be compromised the following week or the following month, even though you got your certification in place. So it's not just about making sure that you get the certification and set the checkbox. It's about making sure you're safe rather than just compliant. There's a lot of things to take into consideration when you are either performing a penetration test or setting up your vulnerability assessments long term, making sure that you are continuously safe rather than being sure that you were safe on the 21st of December or whatever date you performed your check. There's a lot of things to consider whenever you're making your security decisions like this. So getting a pen test done by a professional team is a really, really strong way to get to a high level of compliance very quickly. But setting up continuous monitoring will help you to make sure that you don't become uncompliant even throughout the year while you're not performing your certification. So generally a really, really good idea to set it up and make sure that you're safe throughout the year, even if you're not just performing your current certification. Let's see here. Uh, all right. So that was a lot about compliance, a lot about ISO specifically. It is a certificate we see a lot, and have a lot of questions about. So I just want to make sure that there's a good understanding of what it entails and what it doesn't entail. Um, is one of the things that I am very frequently asked. Do you do it? Do you perform it? We don't do ISO certification for you. We're not an auditor, but we do work very closely or oftentimes very strongly with compliance teams. So we do have an internal team as well who are performing pen tests on demand. So our service team will be performing these pen tests for other companies whenever they need to have a check performed. But that's part of a larger ecosystem. I generally always recommend to everyone I speak with to set up this continuous monitoring for anything that is critical or important, just to make sure they don't run into a situation where they get compromised when they could have easily avoided it. The cost of being safe is much, much less than that of being compromised. So even if you haven't had the misfortune of being compromised before, when you're doing your certification, when you're doing your compliance checks, the next step of just setting up continuous monitoring has a relatively low cost and a low barrier of entry. So highly recommended that you set that up as well. When you're setting up your initial scans, so you are including all your different assets, in our solution, the way to do it is quite simply either adding in your assets, making sure you have the IPs if you're scanning a network, all of the subdomains if you're scanning websites or web apps, and then setting up your different tools depending on what specifically you're trying to achieve. So all of our tools work in a very similar way in that you can either target from the asset list in here using a tool, or you can target from the new scan section, selecting the tool that you prefer, and then target it at whatever asset or target of the asset that you're trying to perform a scan on. It's fast and simple to do once you've done it a couple of times. It is just a 5 or 10 click configuration initially. And then once you have your initial scan, ensuring that the results are matching what you actually wanted to achieve, and then setting up your continuous monitoring after the fact. Let's see here. All right. So we have a question. How is the NetScan LAN done? Through an agent software that's installed on a machine on the LAN? If so, can that machine be a Windows PC or must it be a Linux? That's a great question. There are multiple different ways of doing it. My preferred way is by using our VPN agent. So we do have a VPN solution, which you can find in settings and then VPN profiles down here. You set up a VPN profile, and then once you have configured that, there is a little guide to how to do it. It is only a few steps. Once you have it here in your list, you can deploy it. This is either a virtual machine or a Docker instance. It can be run on a Linux machine. It can be run on a Windows machine. Anything that can run either any of these virtual machines or a Docker instance will be able to act as the agent. The agent itself doesn't perform the scan. It just creates a VPN tunnel to our solution in the cloud. So it doesn't run the scan itself. It just gives access. The only configuration aside from booting it up potentially will be in your firewall configuration to make sure that the system has access. Sometimes you'll have to allow listed. Some firewall settings will allow it automatically. So during your deployment, that will be the only limitation there. So once you have that set up, then you'll add in your list of IPs. When you do that, in here in the add assets item, you'll be able to do an IP range. Oops. Like this, and then just allow live targets. This will ping your IP range, whatever range it is. Now I'm just setting the full range, but you can limit the range however you need to. And then by allowing only live targets, including only live targets, you will ping them first, make sure they are live and responding before adding them into your list. This does require that you do have ping enabled on your network. So if you've disabled that, unfortunately, you'll have to add them in manually, or accept the fact that you'll also have any not live targets in your list here. So that's a great question. I hope that answers it. But yeah, essentially, I would do it by using the VPN agent. It is an add-on you purchase separately. So if you don't need to scan within your network, it's not something you're paying for, but should you need it, it's something we can add into any of the packages we have. Speaking of, we have a couple of different solutions or packaging solutions. So first off, you have the WebSec, which is just for network security. If I go into my new scan section here, the tools associated with that would be the network and cloud section down here. So this is the minimum purchase you can have. This is just for network security. You'll be able to perform internal and external scans of your network. If you need to also be scanning web apps, the next solution up would be, or package up, would be the WebNetSec. The naming is obvious, I think. It allows you to do web and net security. So you'll have the web tools here as well included in your package. And then the last package we have is the Pentest suite. It gives you everything that you've just seen here, and then also the exploitation tools. That also comes with the option to do templated reports automatically in it. So you have that included as well. See here, we have another question. When there are no shown issues, we fix the indicated issues. How can we make the pen tests more aggressively, check in a way that a real threat actor might? We're concerned about blind spots, but naturally, I'm aware we have to be careful of issues to balance ethical testing. That's a great question. Once you've performed your scans and you have done your vulnerability assessment and you have eliminated as much of it as you could and accepted the parts that you can't, there will almost always be some parts that you can't close for whatever legacy reasons. There's oftentimes something that's running and you know it will have a vulnerability on it. And the best you can do is sandbox it or whatever it might be for legacy reasons. Once you've done all of those steps, the next part that we recommend doing is the pen test. So moving from just vulnerability scanning to actually pen testing. This is where, with our tools, you'll be using inoculated packages. It will test if it's able to technically extract information or access things it shouldn't be allowed to. It takes things one step further. Once you've done all of this and you've performed your pen test with our tools or with other tools, the next step then becomes, generally speaking, using the open source tools available in the market to perform more aggressive steps that potentially can harm your environment. So generally speaking, that's where we switch to a staging environment, or ideally, if you can time it with anticipated downtime, that's where you're doing more aggressive tests. We do also have that in our sniper tool here. We have an option to turn off safe exploits only. This is where it becomes a little bit more aggressive. It tries some things that potentially can break things. So that's where you cross into potentially less safe hacking. If you want to take it any further than that, it's impossible to not be slightly unethical. You start using some of the tools that are explicitly meant for causing harm, or you are doing things that, if you're doing it against a source that wouldn't be your own, it would be illegal. So the next step up becomes unethical hacking, really. Great question there, though. Let's see here. You're welcome. All right. So that was the part we kind of scheduled for and really wanted to make sure we covered. If there's anything else you'd like to see me talking about or have anything you'd like to ask questions, please feel free to put it in the Q&A section as well. I'll be happy to go into details about some of the other parts of the tools. I tried to focus really hard on just the compliance bit today. We will have other sessions where we go into depth about some of the other parts of our solution, but we'll take it over multiple different weeks so we don't overwhelm with too much information. Generally, when I do a walkthrough, it's more broad and less depth. So I hope you like this format as well, and it helps you to kind of get an understanding of what are you able to do with our tools, and how do you use them in a way that makes sense to you. All right, so attack surface. So our attack surface part here in the left-hand side will automatically populate as you're performing all of your other steps. It's actually really quick to go over, so I'm happy to do that now as well. Essentially, what you have here is a list of targets and their associated technologies, basically just listed out. I generally sort it by technology. It gives me a nice overview of what tools I might be able to use to target any of the assets that I'm working with. So if I'm trying to figure out what solutions I should be using aside from just the ones that I have here, this is where I would start. This also works really well if you already have a SIEM or a SOAR. They generally take a JSON input for attack surface mapping, so it doesn't have to do it itself. A lot of the attack surface mapping tools that comes with SIEMs and SOARs are very surface level, so they don't get into depth, and they don't even fingerprint ports or anything like this. So if it's not extremely obvious, there's generally a lot of things that are missed by the Siemens Source Solutions automatic discovery. So you can use our tools as part of a larger ecosystem. If you already have a SIEM or SOAR, this integrates perfectly with that as well. All right. I think that's more or less what we wanted to cover. I will give you a moment to consider if you have any questions or anything you want to speak about here. This is an open forum, so I'm happy to take whatever it might be. If there's anything I can't answer, I'll let you know. I'll say that's not a question for me. It might be a question that is too technical for me or needs to go to an engineering team. I'm happy to bring them to the people that needs to answer them. So this is a forum that ideally, as we develop it, will be for everyone to participate in and be able to give insightful questions, or if they have some feedback they'd like to, I'll take that as well when we're here, and I'll distribute it to the associated team members if it's not for myself. All right. Right. In case you've missed it, we will have a second session as well later today. So we have the session right now, and then we have another session. It will be at 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, Eastern European Standard Time. So if you came in late or if you want to revisit, I'll be here again a little bit later today. We planned it out so we have a European time zone and then a little bit of the US time zone. I know it will be very early for the people over there, but if you have any colleagues in the States and they couldn't participate in this one, feel free to invite them to the next one and they'll be able to participate there as well. Um, just so you're aware, also, if you feel like joining in again and hearing the same information twice, you'll always be welcome there as well. Yeah. All right. I think we will close up here. I'll thank you all very much for your time. It's been a pleasure presenting for you, and I look forward to seeing you again next Wednesday. Thank you very much. Bye bye.